Welcome to Fueling Your Legacy, hosted by Samuel Knickerbocker. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a new, stronger foundation essential in creating your legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. Welcome back to Fuel Your Legacy. We are super excited for the guest today. I actually met Bronwyn Ison on Instagram, I believe. It was either Instagram or Facebook, and got to see her story and kind of learn more about what she's doing. It's phenomenal. Bronwyn is an award-winning celebrity yoga instructor, founder and CEO of Evolve Yoga, which you can follow on Facebook or Instagram, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. She's a motivational coach and speaker. She's a podcast host of Evolve with Bronwyn. Entrepreneurship, and then she does health, wellness, and faith. She's a columnist, that's a hard word. Columnist, legacy. I don't know how to say those words. These are tough. I tried this before, but it's vocalizing them. Lululemon ambassador, and a women's health magazine action hero. I mean, there's even more. I'm kind of just going to be done. We'll post it on there. She's just incredible. She's done so many things, but I think more than what's cool about these things that she's done, her accomplishments, is who she's become and why she's become them. So her story of coming from a setback or from a trial and triumphing and not letting those things define who she is. She's intentionally creating her future. And the things you're going to notice about the guests that I bring on are, when they're intentionally creating, there is a long list of stuff, but identifying why they're creating is a huge question that sometimes they don't even have the answer to. Bronwyn's going to share her answer to that question, which is going to be fantastic. But just keep in mind, if you are somebody who's constantly creating, ask yourself why. Ask yourself if you're doing it for the right reason, but also recognize you're not letting your past define you. You did get up and you are moving forward stronger. So super excited. I got to be a guest on her podcast a few weeks ago and be interviewed for that. And it's just exciting to get to know awesome people. So thank you, Bronwyn, for being on our show, and just share a little bit more about your story, your setbacks, and how you've overcome them.
Sure, Sam. And thanks for having me on your podcast. My gosh, I'll go back a ways here, which was probably about 12 years ago now. I was living in Arizona, and I moved to Arizona to go to Arizona State University, where I ended up receiving a broadcast journalism degree from the Walter Cronkite School there. So I initially went there to go to school, and then all of the other things in life start to happen. You meet someone, you get married. I have 2 daughters. And I met he's my ex-husband. I met my husband, let's see, what year was that? It was like 98 or so. And we got married in 2001. Everything was great. Had my first daughter in 2004. And things were going really, really well. My ex-husband worked in the car business and then got out of the car business. And we started our own mortgage company in 2004. So 2004, 2005-ish, started our mortgage company. That is when, if anyone can recall, the height of a very good economy. The market was big. Everybody was making money. And things were really good. I had a really, really good lifestyle. Things were great. Right after I got married, though, I did move out of the area. I'll just briefly say this, for a short period of time, and went and anchored and reported the news. So I was using my degree and ended up developing those skills as an anchor and news reporter. And then it was time for me to move home, and that's when we started a family. So we were doing really, really well with our mortgage business. And then, let's see, I got pregnant again, had my second daughter in 2007. In 2007, we started to see everything kind of plummet and fall to pieces and crash, and including the market, so did my marriage. My marriage began to crash. Everything started to fall apart. And really, I at the end of the day, we lost everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. I lived like I said, a very comfortable lifestyle. I had the $1 million house, the beautiful cars in the driveway. I could go and do whatever I wanted anytime I wanted. I had a nanny. I mean, if you want to call that the good life, you know, that's what was going on. And then we lost it all in that crash. So when we lost it all, I lost not only my marriage, the house, the cars. I had no money. I was completely depleted. My ex-husband went off and did his own thing. I carried on to do my own thing. We now lived in separate states. I moved to California. He stayed in Arizona. And when I lost everything, it was very challenging, not only because we lost everything, but I was also very sick with an upper respiratory disease called coccidioidomycosis, which is also known as valley fever, of which I contracted in my 3rd trimester of my pregnancy. And so everything was falling apart, including my health. When I moved to California, my parents helped me move here, and my parents said, you know, we can only help you for a certain amount of time. And my dad gave me a car to use, which I was very grateful for, because I had to go in and turn in my other vehicle because I was afraid that someone would take my car while I was in the grocery store because it was under repo. And so it was nice of my dad to lend me a car. And my mom helped me find a place to live. And then it was so challenging with respects to even finding work. So whether or not I was educated or not, nobody was hiring. Okay, so the economy's down, nobody's hiring. And it's like, so what do I do? And so I knew how to do 2 things. I knew how to teach yoga, and I knew how to anchor and report the news. And I knew how to teach yoga because now, almost 20 years ago, I had a foot injury that led me to the mat, because the physical therapist that I was working with suggested that I do so that I could restore strength back into my leg, balance, and improve my confidence. And the yoga practice certainly does help you do all of those things and so much more. So I had an opportunity to start working at a local club, which is one of the most prestigious communities and health clubs in the country here in the Palm Springs area. And then I also had an opportunity to work with a company out of Los Angeles where they hired me on as their medical host, and I started traveling with them around the United States, interviewing physicians in their practice and then having that shared out into their communities and on the web. So I essentially had 2 jobs, which was great, but they were not full-time, and they certainly were never enough, especially to help take care of 3 people. Mm-hmm. And my daughters were really little. They were 3 and just 1 year when I moved back to California. And because those 2 jobs were not enough and my family said, we can't help you anymore, I had to go on food stamps and state assistance. So that was a very, very humbling time in my life, because here I was, an educated girl, had a completely different lifestyle. And I really was never like, oh, woe is me and everyone should feel sorry for me. And it was really like, how did I get here and how did this happen? And how am I going to get out of this? So I knew that I had the skills and the smarts, but I was also so broken. I was so broken mentally, emotionally, physically, to where it was very difficult for me to pick myself up and dust myself off. And it took a long time to do that. And I remember my dad telling me, you know, it's going to take you about 5 years to recover from this. And that to me felt like one of the biggest punches in the gut, because I thought, 5 years? Are you kidding me? Like, I can't live like this for 5 years. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. And I'll say that I did it in 4 years, but he was just about accurate. But it took me 4 years to really pick the pieces up. But because of my writing and my journalistic background, my mom ended up bringing a newspaper home one day. And she said, you know, why don't you reach out to this publisher and see if maybe you could write for her? She just was trying to encourage me to use my skills. So I did reach out to, who's now a very good friend of mine, and I write for her on occasion. Her name's Lauren Del Sarto, and she has a publication here. And so I reached out to her and said, I'd love to share my story about coccidioidomycosis, valley fever. And she was very receptive, plus she had a new publication. And so I submitted an article, and that started the ball rolling. I also knew that I couldn't teach at that prestigious club forever because they were starting to cut back on my classes, which also meant it was cutting into my income. I had an opportunity to then start classes publicly at a local polo field. And so I was able to open that up 2 days a week. And for the longest time, Sam, it was just my mom and I that showed up to those classes. And it was my mom and I'm telling you, I still had no budget. So I always give kudos to Vistaprint because I ended up developing a card on Vistaprint with a picture that I had of myself in a pose and where you could find me and where you could take the class. And I blanketed my town with these postcards because not only did I want to try and start having people come to my class, but also it was like I needed to make money, right? Mm-hmm. So finally people started to show up, and I was at that facility for a little over a year, and I grew it to sometimes 50, 60, 70 people would show up. So wow. It took a while, but people started to talk, and it was great. So not only did that start to fuel me personally, because it started to give me the confidence that, boy, maybe I'm actually pretty good at this. Mm-hmm. So after a while, because they have a lot of events over at the polo fields, people said, you should open your own space. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way I could ever open my own space. I still have no money. I have no means. Fortunately, along the way, I would pick up extra work here and there. I was hired for a company out of Minneapolis to do some work for them on camera. And along with being paid, they also gave me stock in the company. And I reached out to them and I said, I don't know what your stock is worth, but I want to cash it out. And they said, okay. And it was enough cash for me to buy a car outright. So I purchased a car and paid for it. And I was able to give my dad his car back. When it was time to come and open my business, I had a car that was paid for, and I was able to leverage that car, take the money out of the car basically, and open up a business. So I needed to get really crafty and really creative with what I was doing. So I've had my now brick and mortar yoga studio, Evolve Yoga, in La Quinta. I'm going on 7 years at being open. We are a seasonal area, so it's very difficult to even keep a business running here. In fact, a lot of businesses close in the summertime. And I had a lot of family support, a lot of community support. My friends were very influential. And really, Sam, I just didn't give up. I kept going, even when I was tired. I kept going. And remember, I am raising 2 kids while doing this all by myself. So I just kept on. I just didn't give up. And I'm still in the same place. Like I refuse to give up. So, I guess you could say the legacy that I'm building is sharing with other women and men that if you want something bad enough, you can go out and you can get it. But what I want to emphasize is that it does take hard work. You have to work at it. And I think sometimes we get caught up in our society with social media and everything, and you see everyone doing all these great things. And, sometimes we can look at what's going on in other people's lives and we think, well, they've achieved all this success, but they haven't seen the background of what it took to get there. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate being able to share my story briefly with you without getting into a lot of detail. But from there, I've been able to create an online yoga platform where I have my classes now on demand. I live in a seasonal area, like I mentioned, so I have clients all over the United States and out of the country. A lot of Canadians, people from Europe, so they're able to pull up my yoga classes from anywhere, anytime, and take class as though they were just here at my studio. And then I developed a program called Better For It Now. And it's 7 principles that I developed that I really worked hard on with a coach. He said, because I'll have people say, well, how have you been able to do it? I'm like, well, it took a lot of hard work. But my coach was like, Bronwyn, it took more than hard work. I want you to think about what it is that you've been doing over the last decade. So I was really able to hone in on that and developed and created these 7 principles so that I can help other men and women start to move forward. And they're principles that you apply all the time. They don't get old. You keep up with them. It's not a one and done. I use them today. And I know for a fact for me that they work. And now I host 1-day retreats here at my studio where people come in and we sit in small group and we're here for about 6 hours together. We're here for, essentially the whole day. And then there's, the option to do an in-home retreat where people can access it online and they can just do it at their own pace. Yeah. So that is what is going on over here in Southern California.
Good. And there's sun out. So I'm curious though, I want to dig a little bit deeper here because I think this is where a lot of people, it's really as somebody like yourself or myself who's overcome something, it's really tempting not to share the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mostly because in our minds, we want to give hope to people, right? If they're in the pain, we don't really want to go into the pain with them. We want to be a lighthouse and like shine that there's a lighthouse at the end of the tunnel or there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But my experience has shown me that to really even help them become aware that there's an end of the tunnel, you have to go in and meet them where they're at and experience that pain with them. So if you're okay with this, I'd love for you to share some of the feelings and just with the best descriptive words or whatever, the feelings of losing your relationship and essentially having to move and start over. Like, what were the feelings that you were going through? What were the daily thoughts that you had to battle about yourself?
Well, the feelings that going back, it was a feeling of failure because it was a failed marriage. It was a feeling of, could I have done things differently? It was very disappointing. I was really sad, and I was also in a fog. And what I mean by that is that when I look back, there are so many different parts of that time in my life that I don't recall because I was just simply going through the motions. And it makes me sad to think about that even now because I feel like I missed out on things with my children. So that's what really gets me to the core. Yes, I'm sad that my marriage didn't work out. And yet at the same time, I was ready to release it and happy to release it because I couldn't take it any longer. We just were not a good couple anymore. But what makes me the most sad is that I had these precious moments with my little ones that so much I don't recall because I was going through the motions. I'm packing up a house. I don't know what's going on. I have no money. I'm trying to figure it all out. And so, those feelings were very real. And when moving here to California and recognizing that I wasn't going to get any more help from my parents, not because they didn't want to, it was, yes, they couldn't, but at the same time, I'm grateful for the tough love. Mm-hmm. I'm grateful that they said, we can't help you anymore. You're going to need to go and get help from the state. And I'll share this. I remember walking into the social services office and I didn't know how it all worked. There's a stack of paperwork that you have to fill out. I'm sitting in a room full of people who are all there for the same reason I am. I'm there with my little girls. It's on a Friday afternoon. I finally get called to the window. It's like 3:30 in the afternoon. And they tell me, okay, well, thanks for your application. We'll get back to you. I'm like, get back to me. Like, I'm thinking to myself, don't you just come here and like, you're gonna help me like with the food stamps and you're going to, I qualify for sure. And it wasn't like that. And I looked at her, and I remember just how heavy my body felt, and just my gut just sank. I was like, oh my gosh. And I opened my wallet and I said, I have like $10 to my name. Like, I have nothing. And she goes, I'll be right back. And she left, and she came back about 10 minutes later. She was able to give me one of those EBT cards because they do it like that. They do it like a credit card now. And she gave me the card, and she said, I was able to work this out for you. She said, go and feed your family and have a nice weekend. And it was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, this is happening. And then we went to the store immediately, and we went to the deli, and I had to make us a sandwich because we were really hungry. So now by this time, it's like going into dinner time. It's like going into like 5 o'clock. And I get groceries, and I load it up, and then I sit down with our sandwich. And the only thing that wasn't covered, Sam, for the food stamps was the sandwich that I ordered at the deli. I was so mad. I was like, oh no. So I had to spend like my $7. I had like $3 left over or something like that. And I sit down, and I'm cutting this sandwich into 4 so that all of us can eat it. And I looked around, and I sat on this bench, and it's very cold in the grocery store. And I'll never, ever, ever forget, Sam, how cold the bench was. It's like time stopped. The bench was cold. The store was in silence. It was like everybody was in slow motion around me. And I just started to cry. And I went, how did this happen? Like, what is going on here? And I knew at that moment that something had to change, but I didn't know how to do it. So I kind of fell into a little bit of a depression for a while. And I'd go over to my mom's house and take a nap on a regular basis, and nap with my daughter because she was still napping. And I got up one day, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I have got to make a change. And then that's when I started to reach out into the community to see how I could start being a part of a community. But I felt a lot of shame. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to tell anybody my story. I felt like a failure. And I think the shame was probably the biggest thing. I was very shamed, and that's hard to overcome, as you know.
Yeah. So I'm curious though, how did you go about overcoming? Like, what were some of the things that you did to overcome the shame?
Well, I surrounded myself with positive people. I have a very supportive family. I have wonderful friends that I've been friends with for 20 plus years, who were always very supportive. They'd try to get me out of the house. And when they knew that I couldn't even afford a haircut, I'd have a girlfriend that would treat me to a haircut, something like that. But the things that I did is that I just, like I said, I reached out to a publisher and started to write for her. I started to gain more confidence in myself, and making those cards and displaying them all over town. And that was disheartening too, because nobody came for a long time. I started to read a lot. I'm also a woman of faith, so I prayed a lot. I was in the Word. I went to a divorce recovery group at my church. I started to just try to connect with people who I know that were for me and not against me.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that it's really interesting. I'm grateful for you sharing that, because that is where a lot of people get to. They get the despair. They get the feeling of, I don't know where to get from here. And then the question becomes, what do I do next? And I'm going to talk about the principle of what you did, not necessarily the activity. Okay? Because the activity, I think, is important. All of those things are great tactical things to do. But as far as like what actually happened, what did Bronwyn do? She started to add value to others first. Okay? This is something that was important for me to understand, because I've been in that woe me situation. I've been in the situation of like, why is nothing working out for me? I don't know what to do about it. I'm just sad, right? or in despair. Sadness, I don't think is even really a good word to describe how painful that type of situation is, how absolutely depleted and destitute one feels in that moment of their lives, right? So sadness, I feel like, is just like a really emotionless word when you're really talking about the pain that at least was inside of me. I don't know. I imagine it sounds like the same for you, but when you choose to start adding value, you have to think of the word forgive. And what are you really doing? You're giving first. The for is missing an E. When you foreshadow something, when you do something before, the for always has an E on the end. But somewhere in the word forgive, that it's missing the E. They combine two words and they miss the E. And so if you start to give first, if you start to add value first, then one, your internal, you start to feel valuable. Rather than waiting for somebody else to tell you you're valuable, it gets to a point where it's like you start thinking my life is pointless and I have no value. And once you start actually confronting those thoughts, you're like, internally, inside of your soul, you know that's not true. You know you have value. You know you can add value to others and to your family. And so then the principle is, are you willing to give first? Are you willing to go out and add value in whatever way possible, to go write for an editor, to go start a class that nobody shows up to, right? Are you willing to say, look, I'm going to add value to my community, and eventually something will come in return?
Yes, very, very well put. And yeah, I've always been the type of person who wants to give and share and help improve other people's lives. And I really went from a polar opposite career to more of a giving career, because when I was reporting and anchoring, when I was reporting, I had what was called the crime beat. I sat in court a lot. I mean, I listened to a lot of stories and people doing really bad things. And so I went completely opposite end of the spectrum, and started to give more. And I appreciate you saying that, because yes, it took me a long time to forgive the people around me in my life that I felt brought havoc into my life. But I did learn, once I did forgive, it released all the burden, and that was a good feeling. And that's when I really also felt like I could start getting momentum to start doing more for myself and my family and for my community. So I'm very community driven.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think it's interesting. Sometimes people think that forgiveness starts with forgiving others because those are the ones who hurt us. Mm-hmm. Forgiveness starts with yourself, right? The self-shaming. You had to forgive yourself and say, look, I'm going to give myself that self-love regardless of what other people think. I'm going to choose to live in power and go share my story and start loving yourself. And then once you are able to do that, then you can actually extend forgiveness to others. But until you've forgiven yourself for the self-shaming, for the failures, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later, ends up being some of your greatest successes. When you really look over the past, those failures are what propel you to the future. And they're like some of your greatest gifts rather than failures. They're like, wow, I'm so grateful for that experience. And so recognizing you have to forgive yourself first before you can go forgive others is a crucial principle that, like, I've said it 4 or 5 times now. Forgive yourself first before you forgive others. I hope you're picking up on this, not you necessarily, Bronwyn, but the audience, because it's so crucial. It's something that changed my life. It's changed Bronwyn's life. And to really understand that and to apply it is a life-changing principle to live your life by, something you have to do every day. That's a daily occurrence, to love yourself first, regardless of what's happened yesterday or 10 minutes ago or whatever. You have to choose to love yourself, and that enables you then to go and love others. Mm-hmm. So it's awesome.
Yeah, and that is something that I do mention in my program, my online program, and my in-studio program, is that, we have to love ourselves. And it sounds so cliche, like you hear it all the time, like you got to love yourself, or how can you love others, or how can you be loved? But it's very true. You do have to love yourself. I mean, I'll openly admit, I go to therapy once a week. Like, I love it. This last week I got sick and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't get to go this week. Because I've become like, I love it. I love what I'm learning. I love what I'm gaining. I love whatever I learn there, I can also share out to my community even more. Right. And it's just that growing and that self-love. So really good points, Sam. I appreciate
That's
that.
awesome. So I'm curious, just because I've dealt with quite a few people who've gone through divorce or something similar. Some people don't necessarily go through a relationship divorce in their in their partnership with their spouse or their loved one, right? But some people go through divorces with their immediate family, where they're ostracized from their family, from their children, from their work, right? I had and this seems silly, right? But it's a similar feelings, right? Of abandonment, friendships. There was a period in my life where all of my friends just completely abandoned me.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what? How did I go from having some best friends to when I would see them in the grocery store, they'd literally turn around and run away from me? It's like, what? Like, what happened, right? So this feelings of divorce can happen, and then you have naysayers crop up. People who are like, "Oh, you're just crazy. It's not as bad as you think. You should get up, get on with it, whatever." How do you silence these naysayers who are trying to get you not to feel because feeling makes them uncomfortable? How do you silence them and say, "No, I'm going to actually choose to experience what I'm going through here, so I might be able to help somebody in the future"?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we've all had naysayers. I think that what I have experienced a lot of support. So I do want to first say that. I've had a lot of support from my community, but I definitely have had the naysayers, or someone who goes and I guess call it copycat, something that I've did or done or whatever, but I always look at that as the highest form of a compliment. If someone ends up and goes and implements something that I've done, I go, okay, well, I must be doing a good job here. And I say that in a humble way. I don't say that in an arrogant way. I think one of the best ways that I do negate anything that is that of a naysayer within my community or space is that I make sure that I just relinquish myself out of it as fast as possible. So I start my day with a daily devotional or that of an affirmation. I come right back to that. So when I hear something negative, or someone is saying something about me, or someone is, just speaking negatively, then I really go back to, say, even like my devotional, and I remember about why, what that devotional said, how it was impactful for me. And I really just excuse myself from any of that kind of stuff. I have no time for drama, Sam. I've had enough drama in my life. Like, if someone wants to talk, because it's a waste of their time, and it's really a big waste of my time if I get sucked into it. And I can't say that, I pay attention to what goes on around me for certain, but I also make sure that I don't get caught up, because I've been there, done that too, getting caught up in other people's stuff, and it wastes so much valuable time. So I really just try to release myself from anything it is definitely mind over the matter. I mean, it takes a lot of willpower, if you would say, to just pull yourself out of any kind of negative situation.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And on Wednesday, we did a book review, and we talked about the book "Willpower Doesn't Work" by Benjamin Hardy, and it really is. I think she's hitting it spot on. Bronwyn, it takes so much of changing your environment,
100%.
Because you only have willpower is a finite resource. You only have so much of it before you break down. So some people think, oh well, it's okay. I don't hang out with these negative people that often, right? Well, eventually it's too often, right? And by the time it's too often, it was too often a long time ago before you recognize that it was too often. And so because of that, you need to create your surroundings. So what she's saying is she takes herself out of the situation when naysayers start to happen. Just remove yourself from the situation. Remove yourself emotionally from the situation. Make sure that you're not getting sucked up into other people complaining about other people or complaining about you. It doesn't matter. Just keep your surroundings positive.
Yeah, I don't appreciate gossip. I think that it's detrimental. And so I try to just, even if it means that I have to go somewhere and be by myself, I mean, that's just better than being in a toxic environment. I'd rather just be by myself. I love the book "Willpower Doesn't Work." I think one of the main things that really stood out to me in that is exactly what you mentioned. It's about your environment. That part in the book was a pivotal time for me. I thought, my gosh, this guy is nailing it. He is. When you switch up your environment or you change who you hang out with, it will definitely impact how you are socially and professionally, with your family as well. I mean, I switch up my environment all the time. I actually do mention this in my program. And I guess you could say that I stole a little bit from Benjamin Hardy, but I encourage people, mix up your environment. Like today I'm working out of my studio, but there may be another day that I drive 30 minutes to a library and sit in a library for 4 or 5 hours, because now my thought process can be different than if I'm in my own workplace. Mm-hmm. So I really try to mix things up.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know that you have these 7 principles that you do for your workshop. I don't want you to like give away all of those things just because I think people need to, well, there's a big reason. Okay. And this isn't to hold things back from my audience, but I think there's value in seeking, right? So I'd rather you kind of wet their whistle and make them interested in what you have to offer rather than just giving everything, because they won't appreciate it the same. Okay. Sure. And that's not to say anything bad about anybody. I'm a human and I do the same thing. There's value in needing to ask your question and vocalize your question, because it solidifies inside of yourself what your question is. So when I do these podcasts, a lot of my goal is to help you think of questions to ask. Yes, I'm going to ask a few of those questions, but I'm just going to seed a few questions that you're thinking in your mind, like, oh, I wonder how I'm doing that in my life. I'm wondering how that applies to me. And so I'm curious, when I ask this next question, what do you feel is your, at least one specific habit, mindset, or behavior that you're putting into practice daily or weekly that's going to help you build a meaningful legacy that we could adopt into our own lives?
I would have to say, Sam, that for years, and it sounds so simple, but very difficult for people to actually be consistent with, is establishing a daily morning routine. How does that segue into me leaving behind a legacy? I start my day off with absolute positivity. So I get up before anybody in the house, sometimes 30 to 45 minutes earlier. I don't touch any of my technology. That's a big thing. So, because as soon as you do that, you're entering into somebody else's world, right? You're not in your own world anymore. I have a daily devotional. I read some affirmations. I journal and I pray. And then I get on with my day. Our day, we have no idea what it looks like when we walk outside the door. Anything could happen. So I make sure that when something comes up in my day, I'll go right back to that affirmation or that devotional. So that way I'm staying positive all day long. And then I know it makes me a better mom. I know that helps me in my business, helps me get along with family and friends better, and allows me to have a good attitude. So leaving, when you say, how does that help me leave a legacy behind? It helps me because I'm able to better create. I'm able to better give. I'm able to be authentic. And I know that if I can do all of those things and so much more, I'm able to give back to the world in any way that I possibly can. And that to me would be leaving a legacy behind.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree. I think my morning routine is, it's either saved me or hurt me. It depends on whether I'm doing it or not, right?
Dependent on it. So codependent on it.
Yeah, no, the last, so we had our second baby boy in January 10th. So our first child, when we had him, like everything went out the window. Exercise went out the window. Journaling, scripture reading, pray, like it was just like I did not manage my time well in my morning, and I very much was responding to whatever was happening, and not only responding to him. I think ultimately I was making the excuse, because everybody's like, oh, it's hard to have a baby and you're going to lose so much sleep or whatever. And because I had allowed other people's perspectives to taint what I believed was going to happen, then I had become subject to that mindset. And so then I was just naturally more tired. I was still getting about just as much sleep. My first son slept through the night after 2 weeks. Like, I had no real reason to throw my routine out the window other than that I had been preparing mentally by accepting these other people's beliefs into my life that it was going to be so. And so it just happened. So about a year, I just lost any real consistency in my day. And that was not good at all. So this baby, I decided to do it differently. So now, rather than letting my wife get up with the baby in the morning, I choose to get up with the baby, which forces me to get up and start my day with service. And I'm awake. And so then whether it's 4 or 5 or 2 or whenever he decides to get up, I get to get up and do that. So it starts me out in a service mindset. And then I've been able to be much more consistent with going to the gym because now I'm awake. I'm not just like hitting snooze. And it's an alarm clock you can't hit snooze on. Best thing about a baby, an alarm clock you cannot push snooze on. Then you have to get up and feed or it just keeps screaming. But yeah, my morning routine, this experience of having a baby has been so much more positive for me because I've been able to be consistent with my morning routine. And as I've been more consistent, it's helped my wife get up and be more consistent as well. Because then when I get back from the gym, then she's able to get up and go to the gym after having like a full night's of rest rather than having to be up with the baby and then try and go work out. So just restructuring our environment. We also changed the bed around in our bedroom just so we have just pattern disruption, right? We just want to stay on our toes. And it's helped us so much that I love that is your secret weapon and your source of success. Morning routines are crucial. I don't know how else to say it. They're just crucial to success.
They really are. And I think sadly they are overlooked and that people don't understand the value in it, especially if they're not doing it. But once you do have it, it makes all the difference in the world, like what you're saying. And that happens to be numero uno on my 7 principles is establishing a daily morning routine. I can't live without it. And when I do, if you travel, things do get mixed up a little bit, but I still try to do exactly that. But if I'm at home and something comes up and I miss it, I'm like, okay, like I have to try to pick up the pieces somewhere, even if it's at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yep. And
come back to it and then kind of start from there. But I don't skip it, even if I miss it first thing for some reason.
Yeah, you got to do a hard reset and just make sure that you're doing that. When I did summer sales for 5 years, and one of the not one of the things, it's just something that helped me be successful is when I would start to get tired or people were not responding to me well because I wasn't responding to them well ultimately, I would go lay down in my car and take like a 15-minute nap and turn the music up really loud so that like it would ring in my whole car to wake me up, just so that I could just start my whole wake up process again. So I'd wake up, I'd redo all of my morning routine except for the exercise part, just so that I could like reset to go hit the doors more positive. And you can do that. Most morning routines, like you don't have to do the full, I don't know how long yours is. Mine is generally anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. And then another half an hour of exercise. But like you can shrink that down or make it longer based on how much time you have that day, but making sure that the habits of sequence are still there. That's what I find is so powerful, is the consistency of the sequence.
It's the consistency. And even if someone only has 10 minutes, 10 minutes is better than nothing at all. I mean, I think people get caught up, I have to have 30 minutes. I have to have 15. If it's 10 minutes or if it's 5 minutes, like read your affirmation, read your devotional, whatever it is that's going to set you up for positivity for the day. If it takes 5 minutes, sometimes I'll write it down. I'll stick it on my mirror and then I know, and then I can look at it and then I can reread it.
Right.
And, if I'm home during the day, sometimes I can go back to it and I see it and I read it. So I think those things are helpful too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, because this is something that a lot of people have struggled with. As I talk to people, I work in a slightly different industry than you. However, the people that we end up working with tend to be a very similar group of people. But when you're making that jump and gaining that confidence, and you start rebuilding that confidence and making the jump from having a great career, working in a certain industry or working for somebody or something like that, and you have this career, but then you need to transition out of it. You alluded to some of the financial troubles that you went through, right? But how do you financially make that transition from a financial standpoint and from a mentality standpoint of dealing with the fact that financially it might be hard to make the transition, but in the long run it'll be better for you? So how do you deal with the financial backing, or what role does finance play in that transition? And what did it play for your family?
I'll share I did work for corporate, and then I was a stay-at-home mom. So I was a stay-at-home mom, and I didn't work for probably a good 4 or 5 years. So I wasn't really coming from a corporate job. But I will tell you that I was coming from a $14 million bankruptcy. Okay, so starting over, I was starting big time over. So I'm coming from a bankruptcy, full depletion, no car, no house, no money. So my circumstance is a little bit different. I'm transitioning from a bankruptcy to how to pick up the pieces to my life and build something on my own and start to earn my own money. And hitting the pavement hard in an economy that wasn't working and people weren't hiring. So persistence. Like I had mentioned before, I didn't give up. I did whatever it took even to put gas money in the car that my dad gave me, of where this was very humbling as well. I would collect water bottles, Sam. I would collect water bottles from my girlfriend's gym, or I wasn't digging in trash cans, but just where I knew that there were a lot of water bottles, like at friends' gyms, I'd turn them in to put gas in the gas tank so that I could drive around. My circumstance is different when making that transition because I had nothing. I guess you could say that I just would take up any kind of work that was possibly available to me. And sometimes I didn't always like the work. Sometimes I was helping my mom with something. Sometimes she'd say, I need a house cleaned. Can you clean a house for me? And I'd make, little to nothing, like, $75 or something. But I didn't give up the pursuit of trying to make ends meet. And then I started to just get into the mindset like, okay, I have to figure this out. But I would have to say I've had a lot of support. I would have never been able to do anything without my faith in God, number one. Number two, family. And then my friends. I mean, I always, say I have, my 3F. It was faith, family, and friends. And that's really what helped drive everything. And I just had a never give up kind of attitude. I just didn't give up. I still don't give up. I just keep going. And even right now, transitioning from having, I have the yoga studio, but then transitioning to offering online classes, that's a transition, even though I have the studio, but then transitioning to offering an actual full program that includes yoga and audio meditations in the 7 Principle program. It's 36 pieces. Transitioning to that, it's hard to actually get your audience to transition. Like, wait a minute, don't you teach yoga? And then you come out with all these 7 principles. It's like, so I thought you just taught yoga. Or sometimes people will catch me. I have some shows that run here locally in my area where someone said to me the other day, I saw you on TV the other day. Oh, I didn't know you did that. I'm like, I was doing that way before yoga, So it's just kind of funny to me that people, I don't expect them to know the sequence of my life or how I've done things. But, really, Sam, it's just, I've always just been a worker. I've always been a worker, but when I work, I love what I'm doing. which is why I keep going for it. If I didn't like what I was doing, then this would be very, very difficult. So I would say to people who are listening, do something that you are passionate about. Do something that you love. And I love serving others. I love giving back. It's really gratifying for me. I find a peace with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think I want to bring up
a question, Sam.
No, I want to.
So different.
I'm going to highlight a few things in your answer to just bring out the answer. Okay. Because I think you answered it beautifully. I agree that maybe some people didn't catch it. Okay. But I asked this question to a lot of people. And I think that again, I'm a very principled person. So when I can take a principle out of what somebody's saying and say, okay, this is the principle that they're living their life by, this is what's important. And when we're making this transition from corporate to entrepreneurship, or from one type of entrepreneurship to another entrepreneurship, or from nothing to success, it doesn't matter. Transition is the key. And the key with transition is, are you doing it intentionally? Are you persistent? And what are you trying to build? At some point, you have to be okay with whether even you're destitute and you're just taking every job. You have to be okay with that you're in transition. And you have to even become aware of the fact that you're in transition. And every day, every moment, every second of my life, at least, is I'm in transition. I never really think about the fact that, oh, this happened and so I am. I always think of that happened, like in the past, that happened, right? And so every second is a transition. My mind is constantly transitioning to something. And when I view life as a transition, then I can choose where I'm transitioning to. And for you had already experienced some life of success, and then you went down into what would be despairing. And so then you were transitioning, taking any job you could out of that. But at some point you had to transition from the poor me mindset to now we're going to get even deeper principle here, from a victim mentality of this is happening to me, to how can I create something? And they're just two completely different mindsets. As long as somebody is going to stay in a victim mentality, they haven't accepted transition yet. As soon as they accept transition, they're now able to go create. And for now the next transition there, I love that you brought this up, because the second half of your answer is like the gold. Okay. So many people, when they transition, this ties back into the naysayers. When they transition in their life, if they don't have support, then people are going to say just what they said to you. Wait, I thought you were the yoga girl. I thought you were this person. I thought you did this. And you're like, I've done all of this, right? I did the same thing for me. I've transitioned my business and how I market myself from one form of marketing of my financial business to I transitioned to social media, which was a big jump for me. And in the industry, there's a lot of unknowns in the social media industry for me, as far as like how my industry can overlay into it because of compliance and things. But I don't care. I'm just going to go do the best I can. And I haven't gotten in trouble yet. And I'm constantly checking to make sure I don't get in trouble, but I'm not going to wait until somebody can tell me what I do. I'm going to go create my existence. And then I went from just social media to transitioning even more to really living my passion, which is public speaking and getting on stage and really sharing some of the things that I'm more passionate about faith and forgiveness and understanding of oneself and actually loving oneself and accepting themselves. And so now I'm getting people all the time who are saying, Sam, I thought you did finance. I thought you did like this one little tiny area of finance. Even my own sister, I called her and I was like, oh, what are you doing for this? And she's like, oh, I thought you just did this other thing in finance. I didn't know you did everything. And I was like, okay, I didn't feel like I haven't been silent about this, like the whole time I've been licensed. So it's just interesting that when you make that transition, you have to learn how to help other people transition with you. And that's a skill in and of itself, to guide them through your transformation without forcing your transformation on them, but leading them through your transformation. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a great way of understanding the financial backing. It really comes down to, are you okay with transition? And some parts of transition you're not going to get paid for until later. And that's just is the case.
Mm-hmm. Transitioning, it's interesting because some people, transition means change as well. And so many people fear change and what it will do to them, because we have a tendency as humans to get very comfortable in our space, in our skin. And the one thing that I thrive off of is change. I love change. Like, I get excited for change. And maybe that goes back to my news days, because I'd walk into that newsroom, Sam. I never knew what was going to happen that day. And that, to me, it was always changing, always changing, always changing. So I thrive off of that. The fact that I had nothing and built something, it's as though I have a tool belt now. So now I'm transitioning into some other spaces to where I'm like, okay, I can pull this tool out of my belt. I'll pull this one out. And even though the circumstance is different, that same tool will be very helpful because I've already been there, done that. And so now I do have that confidence where before I had to build the confidence, but now I have the confidence. Mm-hmm. And I know that my transitioning, it's going to take a while, but I know that it will reap incredible benefits, not only for everybody else, but for myself and my family.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something that you said. Some people hate change, and you love change. I love change as well. I think this is the differentiator there when we're talking about change and why somebody would either love it or not love it. Okay, and let me know if you've seen this in your business. I've seen it in my business a lot, but I think it comes down to who is creating the change. If everybody I've talked to who doesn't like change, the change that they don't like is when somebody else imposes change on them, or when their circumstances or their life of something happens outside of themselves and it forces change onto them. Then they don't like it. If you can get them into the mindset of, I'm going to go create the change I want to be in my life, then that's when change becomes exciting, because you understand the idea of creating change rather than accepting change. And they're two very, very, very different things. They might look the same on the outside.
Yeah, I like that, Sam.
But they're very different.
Very good. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's so cool because I deal with my wife on this a lot. She's like, this is happening. I'm like, just choose how you want to respond then. Like, you get to choose this. You don't have to respond at all. You could just sit there and do nothing, or you could choose to respond this negative way, or you could choose to respond the positive way. But just know that there is a point in time between event happening and your response that you get to choose. Mm-hmm. Like, it's been given you the ability to choose that. Now, over time, habits and environments, they will sometimes create that change for us, and it will be more natural to automatically choose a negative response to that and create a negative thing out of it. But if you can be conscious that you have the choice, then you can consciously create. And sometimes it takes changing your environment or the people you're around to consciously create the positive change you want in your life. And then what happens is the people around you, this is where the naysayers come back in, the people around you feel like, whoa, you're changing, which now is forcing me to change if I want our life to stay the same. And that's when they're going to say, no, you shouldn't change. You're wrong for changing, because now you're changing their experience. And rather than them intentionally choosing to come into your life and to change with you, they feel like they have to change. And so it's all perception about who's creating the change and how you frame the change.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Very good point.
Yeah. Awesome. You brought it up. I didn't bring it up, but you said it first. I just want to make sure people understand it, because it's such a powerful thing. So, and you may recognize this as well. So often we become unconscious. How do I say this? Unconscious competence. Mm. We go through scenarios in our life where just to survive, we learn and we adapt and we create these specific behaviors in our life, and they become natural to you and I, but we aren't even conscious of what we did. So then we don't know how to help anybody else. And so we're extremely competent, but we aren't conscious of our competence. And so when we can bring it to awareness and say, oh, this is what I'm doing, now we're actually able to go share that with others and help them create the change in their lives that they want.
That's a really good point, because like I had mentioned earlier, I said, people had come to me and asked me, so how are you able to create this studio? How did you do it? And I would always say, well, I just did it. And that's why sitting down, I'm like, well, I just did it.
The worst response ever. Because they're like, well, you're better than me then. I could never do this.
I'm like, I don't know. I didn't have a choice. I just did it. And I didn't have a choice. And I talked to this about my therapist. She's like, do you kind of wait until your back's up against the wall to like ever make a change or do anything? I go, well, sometimes, because then I'm forced to do it. Like, I almost kind of like the thrill of being forced to do it, because then I've learned what I'm capable of doing now, versus before I didn't think I could do something. But then when my back's up against the wall and I'm forced to do it, I recognize my capabilities. So when my coach said to me, well, I mentioned to him, people say, how do you do it? And he said, Bronwyn, you didn't just do it. I need you to really think about how you did it. And that is exactly within 3 days, Sam. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh, because I prayed about it. I really thought about it. Within 3 days, I had my 7 principles. Boom, 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 boom. Had them out. Like, I said, okay, wow, this is how I did it. And this is how I'm still doing it. Like, I still abide by what got me here, really. I mean,
right.
And so I know that I can build on these principles. And I wish so badly someone would have given me a guide and said, here's how to do it. But also at the same time, sometimes, you have to do it your way. Now, my principles are a guide. You're not going to do it the same way I do it. I don't expect you to do it the same way I do it, but I'm going to give you some really good questions for you to answer. It's definitely a rich program where you will be challenged. You got to look deep inside. You've got to ask yourself some really hard questions. But I know for a fact that it works, because the testimonials that come from it, people are like, wow, this is totally life-changing. So yeah, going back, sometimes we don't know how to lend advice until maybe we really sit down and think about it. So really good point. Really, really good point.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Go back and re-listen to that. But I'm curious, because now my guests and me are more interested now than ever. How do we get a hold of you? How do we start following your journey? How do we get parts and pieces of this? And is there any way we can be part of your world?
Yes. And thank you for asking. When it comes to websites, I have a couple of them. So one of them is evolveyoga.com, but it's E with a hyphen, Volve, VOLVEYOGA.com. And then you can follow me on Instagram as Evolve Yoga Online. And then you can also go to my other website, which is my first name and last name, Bronwyn Ison. That's BRONWYN. Ison, ISON. It's all one word, .com. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Bronwyn _Ison, ISON. So same spelling as the website. I'm also on Facebook as Bronwyn Ison and Evolve Yoga. So any of those places, and I would imagine you're probably going to put all of that on your website, or however people can, because I know my name is kind of tricky.
Yep. Yeah. No. It will all be on the show notes of the podcast there. But definitely go check out those links. And you mentioned earlier you might have a little code or a discount code if they wanted to get and engage with you with one of your 7 principles or your webinars or online.
I do, and thanks for bringing that up. So the 7 Essential program is actually a different website. The program is called Better For It Now, because I am better for it now that it all happened. So it's betterforitnow.com. And it's just a landing page. There aren't a lot of specifics on there, but I want to give your audience 50% off. So the program is usually $197. It's half of that. They need to just enter the code LEGACY.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So if you go to the show notes here and type in legacy, then you'll be able to have access to that. And I'm excited for people to go and learn more from you. It's been inspiring talking to you. we're gonna jump ahead now. I'm curious what your answer will be. As we've talked about it a few times in the episode so far, but it always comes out a little different when I ask this question this specific way. So that's why I ask it this way. But we're gonna pretend that you're dead now. Okay, you've died. It's now 6 generations from now. So you've got your great grandchildren. Okay, they're sitting around a table, all eating together, and they're talking about your life, your legacy. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want them to be saying about your legacy?
I would be hopeful that they would say that I was a woman that was full of love, great energy. I was a wonderful mother and friend and daughter and a giver to those who were in need.
Awesome. I can see that happening already just from following you on the various social media sites. I know that that's what not only you're giving, but also what your audience is getting. And that's important as well, is that's also what your audience is picking up. Sometimes we think we're communicating one thing and it's not coming through. So it's cool to see that not only are you communicating that, but your audience is as well. So thank you so much, Bronwyn. And we're super excited to have you on the show. Just thank you for all of your words of wisdom, and we really, really appreciate it.
All right, Sam, thanks so much. This was super fun, and loved being a guest.
Thanks for joining us today. If what you heard resonated with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me so I can give you a shout out on the next episode. And thanks to all those who have left a review. It helps spread the message of what it really takes to build a legacy that lasts. Catch you next time on Fueling Your Legacy.